Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kinder, the Tiger Lights, and I, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my books and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you want to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 12 of The Captain's Heart. Gralgiran swiped his bracelet against the door sensor and then entered his authentication code. While he did this, Tom leaned against him, head resting against his shoulder. Unlike Gralgiran's mane, which would be tangled until he took the time to straighten it, his friend's fur already looked ready for duty, being so short. Did we really have to deal with this now? Tom asked, then cracked a yawn that exposed all its teeth. You could have stayed in bed, Gralgiran replied, as the door opened, revealing a narrow walkway. Tom nuzzled his neck before he moved. You too? I thought you had someone dealing with us. Gralgiran scratched his friend's undermuzzle so he could step away, except he was supposed to be here in the morning. Hopefully Tom who was usually quite perceptive, was still too sleepy to see through the excuse. Not that he knew why the Earther was here in the middle of the night, hours before he said he would, but he just needed to see him when he'd been contacted about his unexpected arrival. The walkway was so high against the wall that if he stretched and stood on tiptoe, his claws would scratch the ceiling. Ladders went up to it from the inside of the engineering room for when there was a need to access the conduit at this height, while the doors were for when it was quicker for a technician still outside to reach them. As the captain, he had override authority on all the locks. Below, Turuk was saying something to Jeremy as they approached the reactor. Why is this place empty? Tom whispered. Middle of the night, Gralgiran replied, studying Jeremy, trying to make sense of what he felt. It shouldn't matter, should it? There's always someone on the bridge, even when we're docked. Shouldn't there be someone here in case something happened? He forced his attention away and to his friend. The reactor's been shut down since it happened. He refused to call it an accident, since that would shift the blame to Alex. From what Turek explained, in this state, all they have running is basic monitoring of civilian generators. Alex would probably put people watching that 28 hours a day, but with being a dock, I decided to reduce it to the bare minimum and have all technicians be with their families at night. Tom noted and looked at the scene. Jeremy was passing a device over the reactor's command board. Well, at least it was what Gralgiran thought they were. Alex had explained it when he'd taken over and rebuilt the previous reactor, but he wasn't technically minded, so I'd only managed to absorb so much, and after years, even that couldn't be relied on. So that's the Earther, Tom asked. Why is he wearing... He's an E, right? Gralgiran nodded, watching as Jeremy turned to take in the entire room. He wasn't worried about him noticing them up here. Not that it mattered if he did, he told himself. As captain, he could be where he felt like it. Why does he have so much on? Lack of fur. The Ridoshi don't have fur, and they wear less than we do. They have an exoskeleton and probably a completely different biology. The Tahornian wear old uniforms. They're lizard, Tom said dismissively. The Saladin, too. Tom glanced at him. Why does it sound like you're defending him? He nodded to Jeremy. I'm not. He hoped his defensiveness in his tone had been... Okay, not his. The hope. The defensiveness in his tone had been missed was dashed by Tom's smirk. He's just a different species. We can't expect him to be like us. He wasn't even sure why he'd been defensive. Other than that feeling, what were the gods playing at? And how different do you think he is? Tom motioned to Gralgiran's groin. His ear folded back, burning. I don't know. How would he? Tom chuckled. What were the gods playing at? Even if he was a different species, how could he be? This had to be just Biliam seeking to render him mad. Not that he thought sex was required, but if Jeremy, but if Jeremy really was, wouldn't they? It couldn't be. It was as simple as that. Okay, it. Okay, one. Those. I need an extra. There. It couldn't be. It was simple as that. Maybe it was simply time for him to consider the hunt for his. That can't be safe, Tom whispered, and Gralgiran focused down and stared. Jeremy had climbed on the command board against her clear protest. He was scanning the column, pocketing the device before grabbing a handhold and pulling himself up. What is he doing? Tom looked at him. Gralgiran shrugged. He had no idea. Jeremy paused to scan a different section before taking hold of it and pulling himself further. How can his feet grab onto anything covered like that? Tom asked. Special material, Gralgiran answered. Not be a part of the hunters, Tom had no reason to wear combat gear, so he wasn't familiar with what could be done. Even the Kelsirian, who wore covering at their feet as fashion, didn't cover the underside. No one wanted to lose the sense of the ground under them. Even combat boots transmitted the sense of what they were on to the footpads. He reminds me of a Shartiran, Tom said, and Gralgiran had to admit there was something of them in how Jeremy seemed able to just climb without claws, or with the same lack of care for his safety. A fall from that height would result in broken bones. Still, there was something of bravery in how he held on with a hand while scanning the top and reading the result. He was an engineer, so he had to feel there was a purpose to it, and he'd gotten whatever answers he needed himself, and he'd gotten whatever answer he needed himself instead of having to provide them. Tom leaned in and buried his muzzle in his mane. Are you planning on spending the rest of the night spying on the Earther? I'm not, Tom chuckled. Just want to make sure he wasn't here to... The Earther commander doesn't like us. I thought he might. He had trouble seeing Jeremy going along with something nefarious. Not that he could explain where that came from. You wouldn't have put that technician in charge of him if you didn't trust him. We should go back to bed. I'm not tired anymore. Tom nipped his ears. Who said anything about sleeping? Captain, our femme greeted him as he entered her office. She glanced at the time on her desk. Isn't it your prerogative to get out of bed well after the gods? That implies I was sleeping. He chuckled. Overactive bedmate? Tom's active enough. Ship work interrupted our night, so we used the time. I thought I'd check on Alex since I'm awake. She took her tablet and stood. He followed her to the main medical room, where 3 technicians were seated at a table, playing a game, while a 4th was treating an injured male's leg. Dock time is always quiet, she said when she noticed him looking, but regulation require minimal personnel. Once they've gone over confirming the equipment is up to spec, I let them pass the time as they see fit. Artif is the game of the day with younglings. They didn't look like younglings to him, but our femme was nearly 2 decades older than he was. She might include him among them. Not that he had any idea what game Artif might be. The tube in which the Centiferid engineer rested was at the back, taking the place of one of the beds. It was large enough to fit 3 of the smaller males, and he floated into the liquid, seemingly in a peaceful sleep. His condition hasn't changed, the medic said, consulting a tablet. Shouldn't it have improved? It improved drastically since being brought in, but he seems to have reached a pause time. Pause point? You know what? A pause point. You need to remember that everyone's different, she explained. So the regeneration chamber doesn't work at the same speed for everyone. Uh, that weird. All different. So the regeneration chamber doesn't work at the same speed for everyone. Traditionally, it will work faster on someone like you who is physically active because you have trained yourself to have more energy. You've made it through an entire session without a pause point. Nearly all hunters are like that. She consulted her tablet again and frowned. Although the engineer seems to have kept himself in good physical shape. Gralgiran smiled. While not a hunter or even interested in fighting, Alec took to combat exercises with ease. He might have been overworking himself, she said. It would explain the need for this pause. Alex wasn't prone to overworking. Gralgiran had to field complaints from the engineer about technicians who didn't seem to understand that shift and mended meant they had to go home and do other things. Overwork led to mistakes. Can it be the equipment? That's always a possibility, but it was inspected recently. Meddling? She stared at him. Right. She said in that tone adults use when deciding to when not deciding, when indulging. When indulging a child, you're a traditionalist. He shrugged. It wasn't something he hid, even if it wasn't as popular as it had been in his grandparents' time. I won't comment on that. The gods felt like meddling in our lives. I think they'd have more important people to look into. Thank you. Let me know when you're able to estimate when you'll regain consciousness. Just remember that the engineer being conscious doesn't mean you'll get answers. It simply means will be able to proceed with the next part of his recovery. Alex wouldn't have answers for him, other than those he already suspected. The engineer was also a traditionalist, and it would take the gods meddling to cause his reactor to behave in a way he hadn't set it to. He left, medical, intent on going to the bridge to see how the hunt was advancing, but found that his feet had a mind of their own. And that concludes chapter 12 of The Captain's Heart. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe, hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is up on Ream Story. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.